Hello, I'm Andy Agathangelo. I'm carrying out this video interview of somebody we're going to be calling Samantha in my capacity as chair of the Secretariat Committee to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Personal Banking and Fairer Financial Services. I am also, however, the founder of the Transparency Task Force, which provides the Secretariat to the All-Party Parliamentary Group. The actual name of the person that's kindly volunteered to act the part of the person we're calling Samantha is Diane Bentley. Diane, thank you very much indeed for volunteering to act the part of this person. You're acting the part of the person because the individual is actually unwilling to divulge his or her name or identity because he or she is a former employee of the Financial Conduct Authority. But from this moment onwards, Diane, I'm going to be referring to you as Samantha, okay? So Samantha, as you know, the conversation is being video recorded. The video recording will be placed on the All-Party Parliamentary Group's website and will raise awareness of it through social media and so on. You, Samantha, are carrying out this conversation with me on the basis that you have already kindly provided a written submission to the All-Party Parliamentary Group's inquiry, call for evidence about the Financial Conduct Authority. Could I invite you please, first of all, Samantha, just to tell us a little bit about how you came into contact with and how you interacted with the FCA. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course. Well, I was a full-time employee of the FCA. I'm afraid writing this submission has really brought back much bitterness over what I just feel was a wasted opportunity.
Thank you. Samantha, in what area of the FCA did you work?
Well, I was a subject matter expert, or SME for short, and I originally was recruited to fill a gap in the FCA's skill set caused by the division of the FCA into the PRA and the FCA. Okay,
you referred FCA just now. I think you meant division of the FSA into the PRA and FCA. I knew what you meant, obviously. Thank you very much. Question number 3, please, Samantha. Briefly describe the functions you performed rather at the FCA. Thank you.
Well, I was recruited as the only SME with my experience in the building, and that was the basis on which I was sold the role of recruitment agent. I was interviewed by 2 managers in the department, and I have to admit that it never occurred to me that they themselves were quite relatively junior members of staff. When my salary request was met in full without any quibble, I really thought that they did want me, and they got clear expectations of what I would bring to the organisation. They knew that I'd been in senior roles in my previous jobs, but that counted for nothing. That I was not interviewed by or invited to meet anybody more senior was really a key point that I just missed. When I joined, it emerged that they had only the fuzziest ideas of what I should do, and I quickly found that the manager to whom I was assigned, who I'd only very briefly met before my starting date, was himself just out of his depth in his role, and he got no idea what my specialty was about. I concluded that my appointment had been sanctioned by the head of department, who saw me as nothing more than a trophy in his rivalry with other departments. In the 2.5 years I nominally worked for him, he hardly ever spoke to me, and he was very cold and aloof whenever I tried to speak to him. From day one, I was never allowed to perform anything meaningful in the role, and I just ended up offering as much specialist advice as I could while being used as a general administrator.
Thank you, Samantha. In broad terms, what has your experience of working at the FCA been like?
Well, very frustrating, unfulfilling, and I'd say the most miserable 3.5 years of a career lasting nearly 4 decades.
And the next question, Samantha, during your period of employment, did you witness any actions or conduct that, in your reasonable belief, breached any law, regulatory code, or applicable relevant policy? If so, please tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, time has passed and I'm not sure I can quote specifics, but the overall impression that I got was of an organisation that knew precious little about my specialism or even my more general subject area, and in fact, the arrogant that refused to learn. I recall one bizarre session with a senior manager whose primary experience had been at another regulator. in which he'd made a brazen announcement that displayed such ignorance of that the true SMEs present, all of course in junior grades, i.e. below manager. We almost all cried in despair at such lack of interest in the issues being discussed. All too often, entrenched FCA knowledge was unshakable, the trite truism being quoted endlessly, even when those from outside the FCA bubble tried to correct them.
On to question number 6 now, Samantha. What examples can you share about when the FCA has done a good job to protect consumers' interests?
Frankly, I can't. The FCA obsesses with issues that are simplistic and therefore easy for senior management to understand. It will spend vast amounts of effort trying to address what it sees as serious issues while completely ignoring much more important issues where the technicalities make it hard for the senior people to grasp what needs to be done.
And number 7, Samantha, what examples can you share about when the FCA has done a poor job to protect consumer interests?
Oh dear, almost at every intervention at industry level in my area of specialism has been marked by such ignorance as to render the FCA's involvement useless. For a year and a half, management at the FCA fixated on an issue that at every industry consultation, at every internal discussion involving technical expert advice, from junior levels in the FCA, they were told that proposals were unworkable and not helpful to consumers. Yet for a wasted 18 months, it became a classic example of management groupthink. Industry objections, however well reasoned, were simply dismissed as, well, if they object like that, we must be on the right lines. I forgot how we got it dropped, but it was really hard work.
On to question number 8 now, please, Samantha. What are your thoughts on whether the FCA lacks the powers that it needs, or conversely, that it doesn't make good use of the powers that it already has?
It's hard to say what good use the FCA could make of extended powers in my sector, as it lacks the internal expertise to understand the issues. All too often, it concentrates on low-hanging fruit, easy issues, while ignoring the more complex products. If it can achieve a minuscule saving for consumers in one product area, it will trumpet it as a spectacular success. But because the FCA management lack the knowledge to grasp more complex products, market abuse by providers in other sectors continues unabated, costing consumers vastly more than the savings achieved by the FCA in the easy cases.
Number 9, Samantha. Have you experienced any difficulties or shortcomings in your interactions with the FCA?
Well, as I said in question 3 earlier, I was recruited as the only SME with my experience in the FCA. As my salary expectations were met in full and without a quibble, I assumed naively that there was a clearly understood role for me and that my colleagues wanted to draw on my decades of experience, but how wrong I was. My first inkling came after about 10 days when I introduced myself at the department's reception to the head of department, my manager's immediate superior. He cut me dead. I quickly learned that the FCA's hierarchical approach to management meant that I was not supposed to speak to anyone more than 1 grade away from mine. Everything had to go through the levels. It was maddening. When I learned of the convoluted process by which policy papers had to be submitted through the layers of committees before they got to the EXO, I nearly burst out laughing. I'd been used in the industry to my CEO calling me into his office or even sitting on my desk if he needed my input. The glutinous bureaucracy at the FCA was alien to me, and I never really acclimatized to it. I guess I made mistakes born out of the frustration, but I simply couldn't break through. I hadn't realised what being graded as an associate meant, and the fact I was paid at technical specialist level didn't help because it made me unpromotable. Eventually, I was shipped out to the administration team, which effectively ended any chance I had of influencing policy. After a year of broken promises from my new manager, I resigned. To my knowledge, the FCA has never replaced me with a similarly qualified SME.
Question number 10 now, Samantha. Have you experienced the FCA being reluctant to give clear answers to questions, whether from you, the public, or other stakeholders?
Well, the FCA never answered the public's queries. They were always referred to the relevant ombudsman.
Number 11, have you been in a situation where you could have helped a member of the public with an inquiry but were constrained from doing so as a direct result of an FCA policy or the FCA's interpretation of an applicable law?
Well, the same as the question before, the FCA just never answered public queries and they were always referred to the relevant ombudsman. So no different, really.
Thank you, Samantha. Number 12, what is your perception of the culture of the FCA and what do you think about it? Tell us about that.
Well, the worst staff culture I've ever experienced in nearly 40 years. Top-down hierarchical management. Do as you're told and don't argue. An astonishing arrogance that FCA insiders know more than any newcomers. An example, for example, on my team, there was a technical specialist who'd been employed for over 10 years since university by the FSA and the FCA. His sole real-world experience was a 6-month industry placement during the 3rd year he was on his graduate training scheme. Yet at team meetings, it was always his voice and opinions that held sway, despite there being other team members, and not just me, with decades of industry experience and knowledge. But the issues go further than that. I've already referred to the nonsense that all communications, however informal, had to go through the levels, and one simply didn't attempt to bypass them. I discovered quite early on that requests for help from another department would be routinely ignored if the person being asked wasn't directly instructed to help by their own manager. I'm afraid that unless your manager was prepared to use up some personal capital on your behalf, you simply would not get the cooperation you needed. The upshot is that no, the culture at the FCA was anything but open and transparent. Most people just kept their heads down and tried to do whatever they needed to get paid.
13, does the culture of the FCA encourage and support staff in raising serious and challenging questions, or does it deter them from doing so?
Oh, no chance. Management decide everything and staff do as they're told.
Have you ever raised concerns or complained officially about the FCA or been a current or past whistleblower? If so, tell us about that.
No, I haven't.
Number 15, what do you think about the possibility of conflict of interest issues at the FCA?
I wasn't aware of any such issues at operational level. FCA staff are generally too junior and ignorant to be of use to outsiders seeking to influence. At Exco and board level, that may well be different, but I wasn't privileged to have that kind of access.
Do you believe the FCA should be more accountable to the public, Parliament, or anyone else? If so, why, and what measures do you think are needed?
Well, I think the FCA is beyond that. It needs root and branch reform or even outright abolition.
17, what positives are there, please, Samantha, about the FCA that you'd like to comment on?
None.
18, if you could change 3 things about the FCA, what would they be?
Management culture, and management culture.
19, the FCA is undertaking a transformation project. Do you have any comments to make about that?
I only know what I've read in the press. It seems to have been particularly badly managed, even by FCA standards. During my time, the majority of staff got no pay rises, not even an inflationary adjustment, often for several years. I gather this situation continues. Internal promotion was difficult, and even when achieved, the overlapping pay scales meant that promotion was often not accompanied by a pay rise. So the annual bonus was often the only incentive junior staff had. To arbitrarily remove it would seem to be heavy-handed and guaranteed to cause mass unrest. Communication of pay and staffing decisions has always been poor. I recall one annual staff meeting chaired from the stage by a very highly paid member of Exco. They stood on the stage and mouthed platitudes at the gathered staff. And when a questioner from the floor asked why some 65% of all staff were getting no salary increases this year, they had the utter chutzpah to say pay rises aren't the most important thing in life. Needless to say, that went down like a lead balloon.
And the very final question, Samantha, are there any other comments that you would like to make?
My view from having been on the inside is that the original decision to split the FSA into the financial and conduct regulators was flawed. The FCA tends to concentrate on the issues in one sector at a time and lacks the time and knowledge to make meaningful contributions to the other sector. Also, there are clear overlaps between financial and conduct regulation that may lead to conflict between the PRA, the Bank of England and the FCA, which the bank tends to win on all occasions. My view is that the financial services regulation should be split between banking and insurance, and both regulators, the banking regulator and the insurance regulator, should come under the control of the bank, and the awful management culture needs seriously addressing. I honestly cannot see how that can be achieved without a wholesale clear out of the career managers who have been in public service for decades.
Samantha, thank you very much indeed. As explained earlier, of course, Samantha is a made-up name, and you aren't Samantha as such. You're Diane Bentley, acting the part of Samantha. Thank you very much indeed. Your actual submission in written form will be added to the APPG's website, as explained earlier, as will the recording of this video interview. So Samantha, brackets Diane Bentley, thank you very much indeed today. Thank you.
Thank you.